Welcome back to the Talking Serverless podcast. I'm your host, Josh Proto, and today I'm happy to say I'm joined by Sam Williams, a serverless obsessive and teacher who runs Complete Coding, which helps companies and developers learn and utilize serverless. Now, he's honed his serverless experience over 5 years on projects, some including designing a chat platform that resolves over 250,000, that's 250,000 customer inquiries a month for international realtors and local government, architecting a backend system to support 3D clothing visualization, and building a solution to manage millions of dollars of communication software. He's also taught serverless development to thousands of people for the last 4 years. The Complete Coding YouTube channel now has over 12,000 subscribers and 1 million views. Congratulations, Sam. And
Thank
don't
you very
worry,
much.
links to Sam's courses and Complete Coding will be available in the show notes to check out after the episode. So congratulations. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing really well. Had a good day working with one of my clients and now getting to chat with you about everything serverless. So, yeah, very good.
Perfect. I know what's more in that sort of way. I'd love to hear a little bit about your serverless journey. How did you get from, wherever you were, wherever you think of as sort of your starting point, to where you are now, getting to have these awesome days of helping clients, chatting about serverless, living the serverless dream, as they say.
Yeah, perfect. So, I didn't go the normal traditional computer science route. I actually have a degree in aerospace engineering and worked at Rolls-Royce doing jet engine simulation. Sounds really cool, but it was just so slow paced. And for me, I needed faster feedback. So I actually like this is before the serverless stuff. Used free code camp to learn how to do website development. Got a junior developer job. Did that for a couple of months. Went traveling. Took a load of courses and got a job as a like mid-level full stack kind of developer at a startup. The one thing with this startup was everything was completely serverless, and I'd never heard of serverless. So I had a bit of a job to basically learn and get up to speed with like what was Lambda, how do you use it, API gateway, security, like DynamoDB, everything. I had to learn that as quickly as I could so I could become basically a useful member of the team. And yeah, through that time, lots of reading blog articles, videos, and that's how I got into serverless. And for me, it was quite difficult because I found there were lots of tutorials that would teach a very slim segment of serverless, but there weren't as many resources that would take you from like, I know nothing to I can actually build more like advanced applications more than just an API with a single Dynamo table behind it.
When you started learning this and finding out that there was this gap within the educational landscape, would you say that, is this where your love for learning about serverless and like wanting to teach it yourself sort of started? Or have you always been someone who is, voraciously trying to learn and to adapt in that way? How do you think that plays out?
So I think I've always been someone that's like striving to learn and be really good at whatever I do. Like before getting that job, I'd only actually had like 4 months of commercial experience, but then went away and took courses on like React and took courses on full stack MERN development. And my aim was basically like learn as much as I can to become as useful as I can for when I interview. And when I went into the serverless, it was the same thing. It's okay, they're using a technology I don't know. How can I learn this as quickly and as effectively as possible? And yeah, not having the resources there was definitely something that frustrated me and is why I basically first started the YouTube Complete Coding channel. It was just, okay, what tutorials do I want to make that would have helped me 6 months ago? And yeah, that's kind of where the channel started. And yeah, now it's grown to where it is.
That's pretty amazing right there. And it's good to see a little bit of, your inspiration for complete coding, coming from, your own perspective, like as maybe like the main user of, I wish I had these tutorials so I could be where I am right now. How do you think of complete coding now compared to how you thought about it in the beginning? Is that sort of the same core mission? today?
Yeah, so I think the core mission is still basically just trying to help people become the best developers they can. And using serverless, I think, is one of the best ways for a developer at pretty much any level to accelerate their career, because there's a lot less roadblocks in the way with like more traditional architecture. You've got to learn about, like, if you want to build and be useful in an application space, you've got to understand auto scaling groups. You've got to understand like failover processes for when your server crashes. How does that recover? All of these kind of things, which massively increase what you need to know to be able to effectively be a part of a team. You don't really need to know as much of that or anywhere near as much if you're using serverless. So with myself, I went from being, I would say, a very green mid-level developer to being a team lead in like a year and a half, 2 years, because I could learn and focus the things I really wanted to be good at. And that allowed me basically to build the products and be a useful team member and focus on like the bigger picture things a lot sooner.
And that's great that you're able to recognize that, and that serverless really provides that opportunity. And I think there's so many, like, that opportunity isn't really going anywhere. Something I've noticed in myself is, since I've been doing it for several years, just sort of getting stuck in the weeds of, oh well, my whole world is serverless, my whole life is serverless. Maybe it's getting older, but then I hear the reports from like the CEO of AWS that, cloud is just maybe 10% of all IT workloads, and serverless is 1 or 2% of that, 3% if you talk to a really optimistic analyst or something. So there's
Yeah,
plenty of opportunity for serverless knowledge and serverless skills, and I think we are really at the tip of the iceberg. So that's more. I think stories like yours are still common, only going to be more common, and is a really good case for why you should be learning serverless, and going to complete coding for learning all your serverless needs.
very nice plug there. Thank you very much. But yeah,
You're
I think
welcome.
I think that yeah, serverless now is really building momentum. I think that now we're at a point where there are a lot more developers in more senior positions who are building with serverless, and I think that's going to now mean that when they move into a new company and there's a new project, it's going to be, why not try it with serverless? We've done it before and it was way faster. I think that's it's going to move from the stage we're at the moment, which is like very early adopters have kind of latched onto it, to now it kind of creeping into some of the more mainstream tech world and into some larger enterprises, which I've seen with some of my clients who, it always used to be like small startups that need to be super nimble. Now it's like there are large multi-million pound organizations who are going, actually, can we use this thing that's helped this little startup grow super fast to actually start this new project or to relieve some technical debt in some of our workloads? So I think the number of serverless jobs over the next 10 years is just going to explode.
Completely. I definitely agree there. I was really surprised to see, you know, I went to the nonprofit and public sector conference in Seattle, since I moved up to Vancouver, Washington, on the west coast of the United States just several months ago. So that's why I have my blank wall behind me with no art or anything. I promise I don't just live in a blank wall room. But that's currently where my office is. But now I live closer up to Seattle, sort of where the Amazon headquarters is,
Yeah.
and they had a big conference for sort of like these really old legacy educational institutions, public sector, government agencies. And I went to one of the talks about modernization of the infrastructure, and each one was like, "We love serverless. We use it as much as we can." And I was like, "Wow, really? I never would have thought that certain industries that have the stigma of being very slow, like not wanting to change. Like, from what I've talked to them, they still are like that. They do move very slow, but they do see the immense value serverless has. So, and they run into the problem of, how do I educate my team? How do I build a successful team? Um, you know, Because in those
Definitely.
positions, people are usually there for maybe 30 years. They spend a full career in these places, so they really need to figure out a way to invest in who they have. That is generally the situation they're in. Now, I'm interested to know a little bit. What is your day to day right now with a complete coding? What does that sort of look like for you, and how has that sort of changed since you started it? Because I imagine there's plenty of things to do.
Yeah, so originally it just started out as a YouTube channel, and that was awesome. I was teaching people, and it was just something I did on the side before work or on the weekend. And through that, I ended up actually having a couple of companies contact and say, like, hey, we followed this tutorial, we really like it, but we want to try and apply it to our business, or we like this tutorial and this tutorial. How do we bring them together and build a product out of it? So I've actually kind of accidentally fallen into consultancy. So my day to day is kind of split now between working with clients, usually startups, but with the occasional larger company, and basically helping them to build out serverless applications or build out products that primarily leverage what serverless has to offer. And on like so that's probably, I would say, half of my working time. The other half is uh, designing and creating content. So that could be a blog article, it could be creating a course, or creating more videos for the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is something I've definitely started to be a lot more deliberate with, trying to choose the topics that I think will really hit home and help people to really get started or to like take a big step. And like it used to be, I just have a random idea and make it, and now it's a lot more planned out, thought out, and hopefully a lot better created content for my viewers.
Awesome. No, I love that piece of insight. I got two questions coming for you from that phrase. So I need to decide which one I'm going to do first. First one will be a bit about the because you said something very interesting about making this content, and then companies were saying, well, can we apply this tutorial to my business? Could you unpack that a little bit more for me? Do you find that when companies are coming to you saying, can we apply this to my business? Is there really something that specific they need help with? Like what goes into making it specific for a certain business? Is it a specific use case? Is it a template of services? Is it just having like some one-on-one tutoring? What is it, would you say, that these companies are needing the most?
So I think the when a company contacts me, it's usually from one of three kind of main reasons. The first is that they can build this tutorial or this product in isolation, but they need help with how to design it in a way that integrates with their existing architecture, with their existing applications, whether it's a CRM system or some bespoke software that they're already running. The second part is that they're new to serverless, so they're not confident enough that the deployment will work as expected. They haven't really got to grips with like how the auto scaling works or the security or something about it. They're just unsure, and they need someone who has a more experienced portfolio to basically confirm that it is going to work how they want it to work. And the third is that they've built it, but they want to expand it or they want to develop more features, and they just haven't got that serverless development experience in house. So they need someone to come in, and it's often they've given it a try or they've drawn some architecture diagrams, and they need someone to kind of go, that's really good, that's perfect. But that bit over there, in 6 months, you'll come across this problem with, for example, like partitions in Dynamo tables. It'd be like they've put everything in a single partition, and it's like, yeah, at the moment it works, but it's kind of helping people avoid potholes that I've personally run over in the past with the kind of things that I've done both as an employee and then with companies I've supported as a consultant.
I think that all makes total sense, and I can definitely relate. I think those are many common reasons that I've seen just companies of all sizes, startups, mid-level enterprises who have started working with serverless or wanting to utilize serverless more. They want help with those three aspects. There's always very intricate, especially in larger companies. There's a matter of sometimes there's greenfield projects that you get to work on or that get made. But even at that point, there may be some, legacy third party data provider that they still need to work with and need to, rack their
Yeah,
brains around, well, how do we integrate our brand new shiny serverless system with this thing that batch processes? There's all these, different problems that come up. So, and that's a great role of education as a consultant, someone to, walk you through those tough times together instead of just,
definitely.
not knowing what you don't know. That's probably the largest risk in technology and in these cutting edge industries. So no, I think that's possible. That's perfect. And then something else you had mentioned before, which is very intriguing to me. You were saying that now your content creation process is, I think, what was it, a bit more methodical. You had said something along those lines. What inspires your content making process? How do you approach something like this, especially in the world of serverless? It's so new. If you think about how many educational videos on you know gardening or planting for winter. My partner is a big gardener and she has a lovely garden that we're always working in with our two chickens. And so there's so many videos on this. We've been gardening since the agricultural revolution. Serverless, is so
Yeah.
small in the time. So you can make anything. How do you decide out of the pool of everything to make what to focus on?
So when I first started, and for anyone that's wanting to start out creating content, it's kind of document what you're doing. So just like if you at work build something, I would often like build it at work, go, oh, that's really cool, and make a simplified version and make that into a tutorial. Just here's how I did image resizing in Lambda, for example. That was one of the tutorials and videos that's done really well, and it was literally just, I had to do it at work for one of the projects. I thought, that's cool, let's make a video. Now that I'm trying to focus on more growing the channel and trying to make the best content I can, it's a lot more around trying to find really common questions that I think people are asking now about serverless, but I think that they will still be asking in 2 or 3 years. I think that you can create the content about like AWS has just come out with this new service. This is amazing and it's brilliant, but it'll only really help people for the next month or two until it's just commonplace to use that. So I think finding content that a lot of the time it comes from like viewer questions, things I get on LinkedIn, or just like questions I see like throughout the internet, whether it's on Twitter, just people asking, "Oh, I'm trying to do this," or "Oh, I did this and I can't get it working." Those are often really good ideas, and then trying to basically plan it and package it in a way that basically grabs the user's attention. So with YouTube, you've only got those first 5 seconds to make someone stay at a video, making it really exciting and really interesting for the viewer, so they really want to carry on watching. Because the amount of, even myself, I love learning about serverless. Sometimes I click onto a video and hear like someone in a very bored kind of sounding accent or bored sounding voice just start reading some notes on a spreadsheet on a slide, and I'm just like, I just don't want to listen to this. So if I can make it sound more interesting and sound more exciting for the viewer, they're more likely to stay. They're more likely to learn something and become a better serverless developer.
I think that's super key. And most of my day today at Serverless Guru is the functions of the chief operations officer. But I used to run all the marketing initiatives. I used to run those here and created most of those. And so I have this heavy marketing background because I wanted to be a game designer. And so I just decided, oh, let me just architect. Instead of architecting purely game experiences, I'll just architect like company experiences instead. And a weird, interesting thing about that is looking at the state of content, or the state of, what sort of content gets clicks and what sort of content, in different industries is popular. And in a certain way, we're in this weird place where there is too much content. Like, you couldn't watch it all. If you decided, I want to watch every
Yeah.
YouTube video, you couldn't do it. But there's also not enough. At any particular moment, is there the perfect piece of content that captures your intention, engages you, and provides you with what you're really looking for? Probably no, or at least it's very, very difficult, especially when you get very niche like this. I need to learn serverless, this niche thing of probably how to implement it, and potentially how to integrate it with my unique system, and not be bored out of my mind and regretting my decision to learn this at the same time. Those are three very, very high asks. So as someone who thinks about, how does one do that? It's like, do we make a game show with serverless? What do we do next? So I think you
Yeah,
capture a
definitely.
lot of those elements. Or do you do any work around, like, well, how do you figure out what sort of questions people will continue to ask? Because in a certain way, how do I utilize this new service? Potentially, if the service gets deprecated, then they're not going to be searching for that anymore. But one thing I've noticed, is that there seems to be new waves of people that join the serverless marketplace, and some of them repeat some of the same steps that have previously been repeated. So they'll ask the same set of questions, and based off of the set of questions they're asking, I can sort of tell how much experience they have. Maybe if they've done it at another company, certain, what is it? Not as many people ask me or are really concerned about Lambda cold starts or vendor lock-in as I used to receive those questions. But those still sort of pop up, so I can see new people entering the market. And so, is that something you consider when you're thinking about what content lives longer, or is there another thing I'm completely missing?
Yeah, so I think definitely when I create content, like I kind of group it into like two main buckets. One is like you are someone who is interested in the topic, and here is a video that will help anyone who is interested in this topic. Those To have that wider audience, you have to have it at that slightly higher level. So it isn't deep diving into something really technical. But I think those videos are always going to be useful for people coming in, unless there is a complete change in the way that we do something, which occasionally it does happen. And then those videos do become less relevant. Like people are still going to ask a lot of the very same early learning questions. That's kind of half the content, and that's probably where from the YouTube channel I get more subscribers because they're new to the content and they're new to the channel. The flip side is like I still enjoy doing the really deep and dirty, like the technical, like how do you implement something that is really specific. I know that that kind of content for me isn't going to attract like 100 new subscribers. I know that it's not going to hit 1 million views. It's not even going to hit 5,000 views. But the people that watch it are going to be like, that is an awesome video. And I really, really like the fact that they've gone into the real depth. And for me, having the combination of both the really technical and the really high level is kind of where at the moment I'm playing things because, yeah, I could go all super high level content and all go all fluffy and make videos with lovely, beautiful music. But I think there's always going to be people asking those difficult questions, and I enjoy answering them because I like solving difficult problems. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to always carry on doing is the really technical side of it as well.
Fantastic. I can definitely relate, because if you can provide the needed answer to someone in their crucial time of need, like many YouTube videos I've thankfully stumbled upon, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like getting your very specific situation like answered. So I think I love that perspective. Lean into your strengths and what inspires you to continue to make content. So that's a good perspective. Now, we've talked a good deal about the I don't know, some meta parts about what is it like to make content, what is it like to build something like you've built, and wanted to ask change perspective a little bit into maybe about the like the developers themselves, the students themselves, the individuals who are the ones actually learning. So something that I've heard around your space is, serverless is awesome, not just for businesses, but for developers as well. Could you elaborate a bit on that? Like, what is beneficial about serverless as the developer, as the engineer?
Yeah, so I kind of very gently brushed on this earlier with the fact that when you learn serverless, because you don't have the overheads of networking and of as much security or auto scaling clusters and redundancy and all of these kind of things that you have to deal with when you're running a server, you can really focus on the things that make the things that basically turn the dial, the things that move the needle for if you're an employee, for your boss, for your company, building more features more quickly, or if you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, or a founder, it's like you are the one building the features for your clients, and if you can do that 50% faster, that's awesome. And I think as if I was a mid-level developer, I would massively be thinking like I want to really learn serverless because it's going to take me like a year or two to get to like the senior or lead developer if I go the serverless route. If I go the traditional architecture route, maybe learn Kubernetes or something like that, it's just going to take so much longer to get to that same level and depth of understanding of what I need to know because you need to know so much more. And in terms of career progression, I think serverless is a really, really promising choice for any developer. Um, but also just on a more day to day basis, like I've not really had to think about like what size of EC2 or calculating like what kind of traffic maximum peaks I'm going to get if I do like if I was running an application using EC2s, and it would just add so much extra workload where I'm not writing code to solve problems. I'm writing code or designing architecture to kind of manage operations. And I love the like, especially when I do work with some clients or when I've done consultancy in the past. And in like a day, you can build with a client like a proof of concept and shit, and then give it to them and go like, this is, although it's a proof of concept or an MVP, you could push this into production, and this like MVP is going to be scalable enough that if you do have 100,000 users one day just appear, it's going to work. If you try and do the same thing and do an MVP with a client on an EC2, it's like that's going to crash, and that's going to crash hard. So I just really like being able to deliver features, and I hope that developers out there enjoy like that feeling of accomplishment. And I think that happens a lot more regularly, and you can iterate a lot faster with serverless than you can with other systems.
I would agree. What is it? 1,000% with with that statement right there. I think that's continual feedback we see from so many clients, so many customers, so many people in the industry, and I hear that the loudest, I think, from organizations like just learning it, or maybe they've just like built their first couple MVPs, and it's like you're telling me that I could push this to production and it would just work, or you're telling me this already scales. I don't have to budget another 6 or 8 months to okay, this POC worked, this MVP worked. Now I need to budget another 12 months to make it ready for my customers. I know that was something that
Yeah.
continually amazes individuals, and that's the argument for serverless just on a purely like efficiency, operational velocity, product development life cycle win is where tons of the value really lives.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like one of the challenges I still get is around the cost of serverless and how like as a business it's like, oh, but Lambda costs 12 times more than if I ran an EC2 with it. And it's like, it does if you're running that EC2 at exactly 95% CPU capacity 24/7. And then also, as long as you're not factoring in the cost that either your developer is spending an hour a day on operations tasks or that you've hired an operations team, there's all these extra factors, and like the true cost of serverless ownership and like the true cost of application ownership, I think, is something that is often overlooked when people look at just like, oh, the pricing of serverless is way more than it would be if I built it myself. Um, but yeah, and if you're a developer, you want to be developing, not building monitoring dashboards and those kind of things. So, oh, that's my personal
No,
opinion. But I'm sure some people out there love monitoring and dashboarding, but that's not my cup of tea.
exactly. Well, one thing I've never met, one avatar I've never met is the engineer that absolutely loves all of the cross functional meetings with the product team, the project management team, and the security team for multiple hours in a week, with and making it so they can't write or push any code for months. So that's that. I've yet to meet that person who truly feels that their soul is awakened and is set free during those places. So thankfully, I think serverless allows you, as people who like to build, like to create, like to be creative, and have that satisfaction of a job, not just a job well done, but a job like finished. And that's a good profile for, I find, who serverless is for in that way. But if you like all the meetings, then maybe maybe a different technology stack is being used. But that could
Yeah.
just be from some interesting experience I've had or I've seen in different industries, especially industries that aren't tech first. Like in many ways, it could be challenging, or a perspective I've seen in companies that aren't particularly tech first. So maybe this is, I'm trying to think specifically. I think a lot of logistics companies. I know people who've worked in logistics for a long time, whether it's like manufacturing or garbage or lots of industries that are just, I have a large volume of one thing and I have to move it over here or move it over there. And it's very hard
Yeah.
for them to sometimes feel like they should be investing in new technology infrastructure. And something I've heard them say is, well, we don't have time to educate our team. We don't have time to, the engineers that we have, they aren't very experienced. They're more junior. We don't have time for junior engineers. Really, we're thinking of deprecating a lot of our technology initiatives. Um, I don't know. What do you think those companies are leaving on the table, when they're choosing against education, when they're choosing to move away from sort of investing in serverless and this sort of infrastructure modernization?
Yeah. So I think if any company isn't investing in educating their staff, no matter if they're a junior, if they're a senior, or if they're completely outside of tech, if you're not continually upskilling your staff and training them to come up with better ways of doing what they're already doing, then I think that you're definitely gonna find that you're gonna be left behind by the companies that are trying new things, that are experimenting. And I think that, yeah, with the whole thing around do you hire juniors is always difficult because usually they're not going to be as productive the moment that you hire them, and it may take a while for them to get up to speed. But I think serverless helps combat that. But as I've said, because there's just a lot less to learn, you can have a junior who very, very quickly, if you train them in the right areas, you train them in how to actually be productive and build useful uh, implementations, and you give them patterns to follow. You can have a junior developer who in 6 months is like really, really productive with serverless. They probably still want to have a senior developer sitting above them who can kind of spot where they might be going slightly off track or advise on some of the more like the really nitty gritty details. But yeah, 6 months of learning and implementing serverless, you can become a really, really good engineer. And I think that companies who are used, like, I've seen companies where they have like junior developer programs where it's like a 2 year program. And for those 2 years, they're not allowed to push any code to a real environment where it's all just sandbox. You're just learning and that's all you do. Whereas, yeah, I've at the company I used to work at, we had junior developers who in their second week were pushing code into the pipeline, which was going into the real environment. And after some QA, ended up in production. And I think serverless enables that. And if you're not, well, I think, yeah, serverless is the best way to make use of junior developers and get them productive as quickly as you can.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks, or at least you heard it right now on Talking Serverless podcast. Serverless is one of the best ways to, get the maximum value out of your junior developers or those in the beginning of their career. So don't sleep on it. Utilize it. No, I think that's a very powerful statement, and I think one thing we've had to combat a lot with enterprise companies, or as someone who recruits for serverless engineers, you can't say, I want someone with 20 years of Lambda experience or 10 years of Lambda experience. You can't really say
Yeah.
those sort of things. But I'll find job postings where they do say those sort of things, and it's like, wow, you don't necessarily know that a senior serverless engineer isn't necessarily someone who has 20 years of experience with that technology. Definitely has some software lifecycle experience, but you can, with a little bit of professional experience or just at a code school with some practical studying and some practical projects, really put yourself to the grindstone, learn AWS, learn some serverless services, take some courses, and be very proficient and being able to push production ready code for enterprise workloads. It doesn't need to be so difficult. There doesn't need to be such a high barrier for entry. So I like what you said right there. Definitely maps with what I've seen in the marketplace.
Yeah, I've definitely had comments on YouTube videos saying like I've just binge watched these 20 videos over the last month and I've just managed to land myself a job as a developer. Or I've had startups who've messaged me saying like we've tried building this app before and it failed and we couldn't build it. We've followed some of your videos and we've now built our SaaS MVP using serverless. And yeah, they're not necessarily like the most experienced engineers, but they're making progress. They're getting things built with, yeah, in some cases having watched like a month's worth of tutorials and done some practice at home or just trying things. And I think that's another advantage of serverless. It's so easy to try because of the AWS free tier that anyone can start up an AWS account. You can create some APIs, some Dynamo tables. You can try out Cognito. You can try all these other fancy services like using Transcribe or Textract like to build out a thing. You could build basically loads of really cool little experiments, and you don't have to worry about the bill being £1 million. Obviously, there are certain things where you can accidentally cause very large bills, but most of the things, as long as you're following like some core design patterns, which everyone talks about, then you can build some really cool applications really quickly and get some like almost like real world experience without having a job as a serverless engineer. Which, if you can rock up to a job interview and go, hey, I've never worked professionally with serverless, but here is a like shopping API that I've built, or here is a system where I can automatically send out SMS reminders based on this or that or the other. Having those real applications that work, that are deployed, it's not just something that's sat in Heroku that you have to prod or poke 20 minutes before you walk into the interview, because I've done that before. Yeah, you can build really powerful applications just on your own for free.
No, very true. Now, another thing I'm always very fascinated and interested in with our guests is, we're always talking about serverless. We're always talking about, sort of like their thing that they're doing. But I'm always interested to see, like, what are the things that, what are the things that inspire us or help like help feed the beast? And I've seen, like on Twitter, not only are you a serverless obsessive, but also a fan of rock climbing as well. And I want to know, like,
Yep.
how did you get into that? I used to do a lot of free bouldering in college, sort of culminating in a trip to Utah and Arches National Park around that area.
Ooh,
And there's
very
some really
jealous.
beautiful places that I got to go and see on this like backpacking rafting trip. Climb some great places. Like to go back. Need to train up to that though. But how did you get into rock climbing and what is it like?
So just as a kid, I was always climbing trees and buildings and anything I could. So when I was like 5, a climbing center opened in Liverpool, uh, an hour's drive from my parents, or half an hour. So my dad took me along and kind of introduced me to it. I think he'd done it when he was 20 or something like that and hadn't done it since. So I was like, oh, Sam will enjoy this. Kind of threw me at some ropes and kind of started there. Kind of built up to the point where when I was probably 16 or 17, I was working at the climbing center as an instructor, training there, probably climbing for about 18 hours a week and competing at like international level. And then kind of met the outdoor world, and like now I actually live in Germany, and have a self-converted camper van which me and my girlfriend drive around Europe and basically go to the most amazing places. And it's got an office built in, so I can kind of work in the office, do a day's work, and then at 5 o'clock just go, it's a 5 minute walk to the nearest climbing area, let's go outside. And that was always a driving goal. It was, I want a career that allows me to be where the climbing is and not stuck in an office with like a 2 hour commute to try and get to some good rock climbing. I'm actually currently in Austria at the moment. So, yeah, doing exactly that, staying in an Airbnb for a couple of nights. But before that, we were in Switzerland in our camper van in a beautiful valley. And yeah, we could walk from our van 5 minutes and be at one of the best bouldering areas in Europe.
That's fantastic. Sounds amazing. It definitely inspires me to get out, especially before the weather really turns to winter over where I'm at, to try to squeeze a little bit more out in the mountains. Do you have a dream place that you would like to go climbing, whether it is, on this side of the pond or the other?
Uh, so there's almost too many places to name. I have a very long list somewhere, but yeah, I definitely like. Our plan for the next 2 years is to travel around Europe, climb as much as we can, and enjoy the remote working life. Definitely considering a big trip to the US, um, going all like basically all the big climbing areas around America. Uh, Big long, ideally 6 month long trip. That would be the dream. Um, but yeah, there's so much climbing over here that we're finding with it's almost too hard to drive that far, because you drive for 2 hours and you get to this amazing valley, and it's like, but this isn't even near the place we were trying to go. We're just stopping off on the way, and it's got enough climbing for months. So yeah, don't think we're going to run out of
It'll
climbing
take you a
anytime soon.
while to work through all the places in Europe.
Yeah, very long
And that sounds
list.
that that's fantastic. Well, if you find yourself on the West Coast, let me know. We can meet up, or if you need a place to crash, my new place has some extra space. So if you need anything, just let me know.
That honestly, I will probably take you up on that at some point.
All right,
Yeah, it'd be great
fantastic.
to.
Well, we know how to contact each other, so that sounds like a plan. Now, what is? I know we're pressing up against the almost to the hour. I don't want to keep you too late, but do you have a little bit more time for some
Yeah, go
questions
for it.
from social media? Yeah, we have some guest questions that they wanted to ask you,
Oof.
but potentially a bit more about I think putting on the consulting hat
Ooh,
a
okay.
little bit rather than purely about the like the education or content side. Let's see. So I think this is like a really maybe more a common question, and this is from Omid Idavandi. How does serverless overcome legacy dependencies to infrastructure? I think this, we've talked a little bit about this in the sense that you've talked about, you know, serverless. Sometimes there's these template solutions or these template frameworks of how to do something, but you have to really understand the system you're working in and match it to that use case. So what is it? What can that look like sometimes?
So I think a lot of the time when you're trying to, it depends if you're trying to integrate with an existing system or if you're trying to replace an existing system. If you're just trying to integrate, then it is just coming down to like, what is the interface going to be between your application and the existing one? Are you going to decide to basically migrate all of the data from the existing system? Could be like a nightly backup into AWS, and then your AWS serverless systems can integrate with their own databases and have it that way. That's one pattern I've seen work quite well in certain circumstances. The the other kind is that when you've got like an API available from the existing system, this is probably the most common, integrating whether it's a third party or an old legacy system. It's, can we make an API so that our serverless world can contact, and yeah, whether it, like, I've had to build SOAP mapping APIs for legacy systems, and if anyone doesn't know SOAP, it is a abomination of an API protocol, which has caused me many hours of lost sleep trying to build integrations. But usually, you can build some sort of interface where your serverless world can talk to your legacy world. The other side is the kind of replacing your legacy, and again, that's Yan Shui puts it as the strangler pattern, where you try and build something and you replicate just a small chunk of your legacy architecture, and you have them running in parallel for a while until you're confident enough that you can just take that little chunk off and replace it with with the serverless bit that you've already built and is running. And slowly bit by bit, you can chunk off bits of your legacy architecture, your legacy system, and replace it with serverless versions. With that, you can have them both running in parallel, so that if you find that serverless isn't the perfect match for certain parts, then yeah, you can keep those, or you can switch and test how performance is between them. So yeah, the strangler pattern is something that is very powerful and very useful for companies who are looking to re-engineer a system.
Definitely. And I think I can also add, I think the strangler pattern was one of the first that I think we really started, I don't know, really starting to integrate our processes around or build internal processes at Serverless Guru around. And, we never regretted it. And neither did our clients. So definitely I can recommend if you're trying to modernize or update, that's a pretty good pattern to use. So thank you, Jan, for teaching me at least about that. And then we have another question around, Kevin Cost is asking, what are your thoughts around, preferred cloud automation applications or toil reduction methods?
So I think this question is asking about, like, how do you reduce the burden on your developers when building systems? And obviously there are frameworks out there, because writing raw cloud formation is absolute nightmare, and it's something that you do have to do from now and then. But if you can, it's much better to try and use a framework which helps accelerate your development. Obviously there are things like the serverless framework and the CDK, AWS SAM, and even like Amplify, which are kind of the core frameworks. And I think anyone that's looking to learn serverless development, pick either the CDK or the serverless framework is my personal recommendation, because they're around for long enough that you know they're not going to disappear. But there are a lot of these new systems coming out, and some of them look really, really promising. But I think until they have grown in size enough that they have the community. So with serverless, there is a massive community that can help support you and reduce the the burden of being the one that knows it all, because you can just go and you can ask a question and there'll be someone in the serverless forums, that the serverless framework forums, that can help answer your question. Or with the CDK, because it's an official Amazon product, then you know it's going to have continued development. With some of these new serverless deployment frameworks, I can see that in 3 or 4 years they may go, actually this isn't for us, and they may stop development. And that's kind of a risk you definitely are taking if you do pick up one of these brand new kind of frameworks. But yeah, I would stick to learning the things that you know are going to be valuable for the next 5 years, because yeah, that's the kind of time frame, because serverless changes so quickly that in 5 years a lot will be different. But if there are any things that you can learn now which you know will still be relevant in 5 years, that will massively reduce the amount of relearning you'll have to do.
Exactly. And, as long as the tool still exists in some format, you'll probably be fine. Because if I think about the kinds of conversations I've had with people who said, oh, we're still using these on prem servers, there hasn't been an update in 10 years. Now we think we want to move away. I imagine something like that, even when we all balk at the idea of, wow, they're still on serverless. They haven't just uploaded their consciousness straight to the cloud and it all compiles with this new thing. Until we get to that point, some of it will probably still exist. And you make another great point, which is optimizing for, our best guesses on what really will still exist. Like I know with serverless framework, at the very least, they've been around for a long time. There's so much third party support. And I think the main framework has it's like an open license. So even if they fully sold everything and that person turned it private, you could just fork their old repository, and then the community could just continue building on the serverless framework.
Yeah,
CDK, Amazon has a great track record with, continuing to build. I don't think they're going anywhere. I wonder why I have that idea. But, I don't see AWS shutting down shop any bit. And, it's hard to place. It's a strategic bet you have to make on these new services that are being developed. And you have to ask yourself, why is it being developed? Is it just so the founders can raise a couple $10 million and sell it in a couple of years? Well, who are they selling it to, and what's really going to happen?
yeah,
Do I know the dynamics of selling those sort of products? So I've always been in startups since I graduated college. So thankfully I have that sort of perspective. But it's
yeah.
you don't want to gamble with your technology infrastructure for your enterprise company. That's not a gamble, a good gamble. So you make excellent points with what you said. Absolute excellent points. So if you could own any animal, real, mythical, imaginary, or extinct, what would you choose?
That's a really
It's a
off-edge
bit trickier.
question.
It's a
Yeah.
bit trickier, and I can also go first if that would help. Recently, and it can be under ideal circumstances. Like recently, I took a small trip down to Florida for a retreat, and I was always really surprised. It was just so hot and so humid and very swampy, and it just made me think, well, why aren't there hippopotamuses here? It'd be so cool to have some hippos. And so I think I'm feeling the hippo mood. Ideally this hippo would, never be aggressive and would only be fun and like to cuddle sometimes, like the popular hippos I see on social media. But I think if I could, I think that would be a very interesting pet, because they kind of act like puppies already. But this one, you get to go swimming with it.
Okay, that sounds cool. Yeah. Very weird tangent, but my mother actually grew up in Kenya and once got
Wow.
chased down a river by a hippopotamus. and says that is one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to her. So
I believe it. Oh my gosh.
they are
Wow.
huge. So yeah, but if you had a nice pet one, that could be quite cool.
Exactly. And then, it's probably the best guard dog or deterrent possible. Someone like walks around and there's a 2-ton hippopotamus just hanging out in a child's kiddie pool, just staring you down. That could be, quite the experience.
Definitely. Okay, so I think my answer. I don't know what the animal or mythical creature is, but there was some kind of dragon that could control the weather. So like it's a
Yes.
dragon. How cool is that?
Hmm. Amazing.
It can fly you places. You can go around wherever you want, and also being able to control the weather. This kind of pulls back to my climbing obsession. When it starts raining and you're like, oh, we can't go climbing because everything's wet. If you
Hmm.
had a weather controlling dragon, you could just make it sunny or make it breezy so the rock dries quickly. And yeah, you could make sure that the climbing conditions are the best they possibly are all of the time. So you could have as much fun climbing as possible. So yeah, it's a very climbing obsessed kind of idea.
Fantastic. No, I love it. I think, it's fantastical and very practical, which I love very, very much in that way. I could find some uses for a weather controlling dragon myself. So if we pile our wishes together, maybe they'll both come true.
Oh, that weather controlling hippopotamus.
I'm also would be fine with that. Oh, amazing. Well, Sam, is there anything else you'd like to touch on or us to chat about before
So
we
yeah,
before we
there's
get
one.
on our hippopotamuses?
So yeah, one of the things that I've been working on over the last probably 6 months, and it's kind of accumulated from a lot of the YouTube videos that I've built, is I've actually made a course which is kind of aiming to get people from like absolute beginner in AWS or kind of like maybe you've used it a little bit, you've watched like listened to the podcast, you know about serverless, maybe you even deployed your first lambda. It's like, how do you go from there to actually I've got some really cool projects where I've built things and I can actually go into a company and be a productive, helpful member. So as we were talking about earlier, how can I be that junior developer that is really helping the company grow? So I made a course where it teaches you how to do serverless development using 7 practical projects, starting out with some really simple API projects, all the way up to doing like advanced single table design and Dynamo streams, and even like event driven architecture. And the course is like it's designed to try and give you that practical experience as quickly as you can. No, it's not like 100-hour course. It's going to get you the experience you need as quickly as you can. So yeah, if anyone is interested in learning serverless, then I'm sure these guys will have the link somewhere in some show notes.
Absolutely. No, I'm sold right now. So so if anyone else finds that, even mildly interesting, please take a look and definitely consider signing up for it. I think that sounds fantastic. And I know we have some interns running at Serverless Guru right now, and so I'm going to share that with them and see as well. So I'm very excited about that. And we'll have all the show notes for Sam, listed in all the links, because we have a number of links for website, YouTube, LinkedIn, Udemy. We'll share that in the show notes. And if you need to get in contact with Sam, you'll have everything you need.
That sounds great.
Rockin'. Well, then with that, I think I've had an amazing time chatting with you. This is super fun. Hope we get to do it again sometimes. And if you're in the area, definitely, what is it? Definitely hit me up, and you can
Yeah, will
at the
do.
very least park your van at my too large a driveway and come inside. We can cook breakfast
That
and
sounds
climb
awesome.
some stuff. Rockin'. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sam. This is
And thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And, for all of our listeners, once again, thank you for joining us, me and Sam Williams today at the Talking Serverless podcast with your host, Josh Proto. And if you like our show, if you want to listen to more of it, check out some of our old episodes at talkingserverless.io. And if you really like it, it would mean a lot to us if you left us a review, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, your preferred podcast listening platform. And I'll see you next time for when we sit down with another serverless guest. So everyone have a good rest of your day. And until next time, we'll sign off.